Murdorf and the Mortal Flaw, Book 1, Chapter 3, A Mysterious Night. Having been enlightened by Windsor, King Chesjophnia had one thing on his mind, the cursed sword of Darvan. It had kept him up most of the night. He had searched through the ancient prophecies, and it haunted him in the few precious moments of sleep that he had managed to reluctantly sleep into. Its history, the legends, the blood it had spilled, and the power it possessed. The sword was a threat to his kingdom and to the world. A meeting had been arranged with Windsor, Navi, Gilmanza, Nuvatian, Cosby, and Nimri. The latter two only because they were with Windsor and the others when the news was revealed, and they must be warned not to tell. Nuvatian wasted no time. After sucking down his morning brew, he mounted his favorite black stallion, Rebel, and rode down the cobblestone street. The early morning fog had lifted, and the streets were bustling with people. He rode out of the city and towards the castle along a wooden path. Admiring the turning of the fall leaves, Nuvatian didn't hurry. He knew he was on schedule. It was as he was traveling within the proximity of the castle that he heard the distant sound of movement beyond the trees. Bringing Rebel to a halt, Nuvatian listened intently and then slowly dismounted. He led the horse to a nearby patch of lush green grass and stepped beyond the trees. Pushing back the branches, he saw a knight in armor. Unlike any male of the kingdom of Shalahim, this knight was clad in plated armor with a small knight engraved on each shoulder, the grooves outlined in ruby red. The back had an image of a dragon. Well, what sort of armor is this? What sort of knight is this? He thought. Nuvatian had left his mail at home, not thinking he might have need of it. All he had with him was his helmet and steel sword. He had only brought the old helmet along to give to Cosby, since he had mentioned his being a little tight. He was clearly at a disadvantage. Now, donning the helmet and drawing the sword, he approached with prudence, aware that discord was coming alive in the land. The knight sat on a large fallen tree, his back facing Nuvatian. He walked softly, intending to sneak up on the armed man. As he neared the knight, Nuvatian stepped on a stick. It snapped, alerting the knight of his presence. With sword drawn, the knight jumped to his feet and began swinging his sword at Nuvatian. A duel of exceptional swordsmanship began. Parrying swords and swinging back and forth, the two exchanged blows, each blocking and deflecting with superb skill. Nuvatian quickly realized this knight was as skilled with the sword as he. Back and forth they exchanged blades, swinging and blocking, their feet stepping in unison with their blades. Nuvatian hoped to gain the upper hand by wearing out this metal-clad knight and disarming him. Endurance was his strategy. "Who are you, and where are you from?" he demanded. The knight did not respond, but rather moved with great force towards Nuvatian. Nuvatian deflected his opponent's thrust of the sword, narrowly escaping being hit. The wind of the blade could be felt upon his bare neck. The knight stepped in close, their blades now locked together. Then the knight kicked Nuvatian in the shin, grabbed at his neck, and swept his feet out from under him, taking him to the ground and sending his sword flying into the air. The knight put the tip of the sword at Nuvatian's neck and stood over him in triumph. Nuvatian's breathing was hard, his pulse racing. He couldn't die like this, not knowing the face of his killer. Thinking quickly, Nuvatian swept his right leg across the planted foot of the knight, knocking the knight to the ground and his sword among the weeds. Nuvatian leapt to his feet and tackled the knight, now gaining the advantage. Wrestling the knight to the ground, Nuvatian suddenly realized that this knight was rather nimble, for a boot knife was now placed directly at his unprotected groin. Peering down at the location of the blade, Nuvatian abruptly halted his attack. The frame of this knight looks different, he thought. Reaching his hand up to the knight's helmet, he pulled it off, unloosing the long, warm brown hair of Princess Nedora. The sweat beading on her forehead looked like liquid diamonds on her beautiful olive complexion. Her lips were stern and unsmiling. Breathing heavy, Nuvatian whispered, "Oh, brother, I'll never hear the end of this." She pulled off her helmet. You're the knight who plowed me over last night," Medora accused sharply. "So that wasn't enough, huh?" Taking a long, hard look at the blade at his groin, Nuvatian said, "I'll never hear the end of this." "What, that you got beat by a woman?" she said, withdrawing the blade and pushing him off. Losing his balance, he landed on his back. Looking up, she stood over him, her blade now at his neck. "Do you give?" she asked, smiling. "Not on my life," said Nuvatian, reaching for his sword. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said, swatting his hand with her blade. "Aren't you a wee bit old to be playing dress-up?" Nuvatian laughed at his own joke. But the princess narrowed her eyebrows, finding no humor. "What are you doing dressed like a knight?" he demanded. "I am a knight," she answered defiantly. "Where did you get that atrocious thing? It looks like you've been prowling around in your grandfather's attic." "It's a suit from long ago and remains in my family. I was just trying it on for size." "Oh, so I was right. You have been prowling around in your grandfather's closet and you are playing dress up." "Training," she said. "Training for what? A play?" "Never mind where I got it. Do you give?" Silence. "What are you doing on castle grounds?" She prodded him with the tip of her sword, teasing him. "What do you think I'm doing? I'm going to see your father. Or at least I was until some... Seeing him stumped for words, she interjected, "Woman?" "Whatever," said Nuvatian, looking off to the side as if he were searching for something. Curious at his sideways stare, the princess looked to see what had captured his gaze. When she did, he swung his leg, knocking her feet out from under her. Jumping to his feet, he then grabbed his sword and turned around to draw it on her, seeking to redeem a little of his male ego she had ripped from him. As quickly as he moved, it still wasn't swift enough, for although she had fallen, she hung onto her blade, rolled onto her back, and pointed her sword to his chest before he could stand aright. "You just can't let it go, can you?" the princess chortled. "I have a meeting with the king, and because of you I'm going to be late." "Well, I think I can get you excused for your tardiness." She sheathed her sword and stretched out her hand, offering Nuvatian to help her to her feet. Would this meeting be regarding last night's events, more specifically the sword of Davan? Maybe. Nuvatian was uncommitted. I could escort you." He smiled at her, offering a flirtatious grin. My God, she's gorgeous, he thought. He couldn't decide if he was more impressed with her sexy long legs or her tumbling curls of auburn brown hair, her hourglass figure, her voluptuous breasts. One thing was for certain, the armor sure didn't help. It covered every curve and every inch of that smooth, soft skin. Why, he decided it was a sin to cover up a body like that in a plate of steel. For now, the hair would just have to do. "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone that I beat you," said Medora as she whistled and yelled valor. "You did not beat me," protested Nuvatian. "I was merely being careful not to hurt you since I knew not who you were." "Oh, of course," she said. Around the corner came a beautiful stiletto. Its shiny ebony scales glistened in the sun. As the mare pranced, its thick mane and long black hair covering its hoofs danced in the breeze. The horse-like creature spread its wings as though it were showing off its magnificent beauty. Stilettos are rare and graceful creatures. Their strength, natural armor plates, and ability to fly make them excellent mounts for war. For this reason, they were nearly extinct, only existing in large numbers in the land of the immortals. Now that's a fit match, thought Nuvatian, as the creature approached. He summoned Rebel and mounted the horse, but only after he had watched her climb aboard her own mount. She kicked and clawed, the armor too cumbersome for the task. Nuvatian couldn't resist the urge. He gave her a shove up by the bottom. Well, how dare you? That's not yours to touch. Her hot temper flared, kicking up her heel at him. Darling, can't feel a thing through steel. Yes, well, I hope you enjoyed it because it's not only the firmest butt you'll ever feel, but it will be the last time that you touch mine. Yes, ma'am, princess. Just trying to be a gentleman and help you on your mount. All he could think was she needed to lose that steel. It covered up her well-rounded bottom, her sexy legs, absolutely everything. Now, on her mount, her temper soothed. She turned Valor around the east and tapped her heels into his side. Cantering through the forest with Medora leading the way, they ducked their heads under branches and leapt over fallen limbs. As they came upon a fallen tree, Nuvatian, following directly behind the princess, leaned forward in his saddle, preparing for the jump. Suddenly, Rebel stumbled, and Nuvatian flew over his head and over the jump too, and crashed to the ground. Nuvatian moaned in pain as he lay face down in the dirt. Medora turned Valor around and trotted back to where Nuvatian was laying. She smirked. "Are you okay?" Medora asked, slowing her mount down and jumping off. "Yes, I'm here in the dirt." Medora attempted to help him up, but his wounded pride forced him to leap to his feet, ignoring the pain. His male ego had suffered enough for one day. Medora ran her hand down Rebel's leg, noticing the tenderness. "He has sprained his ankle. We're going to have to walk from here. Good thing the castle is just beyond the trees." Although Nuvatian regretted his faithful horse injuring its ankle, he did enjoy spending the extra time with the beautiful princess, even if she was dressed like a tin man.